My name is Todah Opeyemi. I'm a multimedia journalist, and today we'll be talking about becoming a lifelong learner and how to separate yourself from the pack in the workplace. I'm with Chidi. Chidi is a corporate finance lawyer. Yes, Chidi. Hi. I think we need more mic. Thank you. Is this one? Okay, guys, this. So there's this quote that says the only way to stay ahead of the curve is to keep learning. But Chidi, I want you to explain to us what is lifelong learning from your own personal experience.
Thank you very much. I think I want to first clarify. When you introduced me, you said I'm a corporate finance lawyer.
Yeah.
So I'm no longer a corporate finance lawyer, and
Right.
I've transitioned to projects law, which is part of what I will speak about in the perspective of lifelong learning and the ability to transition, in career. So I think first, when I speak about lifelong learning, I think the first thing I ask maybe people I mentor are, how ambitious are you really? Are you comfortable with the level you are in? Do you want to be average? Some people want to be average, or you want to be a superstar. I mentor superstars, and when I speak to people, I try to encourage them to get to the pinnacle of their career. So lifelong learning essentially is your commitment to evolve, to always learn, to always be prepared to get to the highest point of whatever it is that you're doing. I think in this context, it's more professional, but being committed to acquiring those skills that will take you to the top. I think that's the summary for me of what lifelong learning is.
And from your personal experience, how has long life learning through your career journey? Can you be specific about it?
Okay, so I'll give an example. When I did my first internship from uni, I wasn't very serious in school, if I would confess. But when I did my first internship in a law firm, I'm a lawyer, I think I saw the importance of being 2 years ahead in terms of technical expertise, right? I saw the advantage of having knowledge that is above your peers. So when I had that experience and I went to law school immediately after my internships, I was reading for law school for my bar exams, and I was reading law practice materials. So I was reading things that did not matter to my exam. So people will come and say, why are you reading these things? Right? But I understood that there's a there's a there's a level you have to be in to get to the very top, right? And I did this during law school. I passed my bar exams. Then when I went to do interviews, I could see that I had an edge over most people. I didn't even realize until it was much later than I realized that, oh, I actually have an edge over most people. People come in interviews and they speak about what they read in law school, but I could speak about practice because I had that inclination, I had that focus to learn more than what I was being taught. And I think more recently, in terms of, an example again, is that I used to practice a niche area of law. You said I was a corporate finance lawyer. That's what most people knew me for. I did that for almost 5 years. Then one day I woke up and I was bored. Apologies if for my employers are watching this. But I was bored and I said I needed to do something different, right? Most people knew me. I had, a lot of my networking was for corporate finance. But I walked away from that industry and I went to a completely new industry, which is projects and construction. I had to start afresh, right? I like learning. I'm a very curious person, and I just thought that was a good avenue for me to test myself again. So I started reading afresh, right? I could go into meetings and I didn't really understand, the technical terms they were using, and I gave myself 6 months, 3 months to catch up and learn, right? So, and the process is there's a lot of humility that goes into the process. You have to understand that you don't know this thing, but you have the commitment to learn. I had to call my juniors. In law, we have it's a very well-tied system, junior, senior. I had to call my juniors for advice. I had to call people that were my juniors to learn from them. I had to do a lot of personal reading. I had to take a lot of courses. And now it's almost 3 years after, and I can stand my own on this new industry that I'm in.
And do you still battle with imposter syndrome? Do you still battle with imposter syndrome?
Oh, of course. I think that every person that, if you want to be successful or if you consider yourself on a path of success, you will always struggle with imposter syndrome. There are always times when you go into a room and you question if you really know this thing. Um, I think that most people will always have it. And I think that not a solution, but you just need to assure yourself that you know it by first knowing it, right? So that when you are given a task or when you have to do something, you give it your best and you do it in a very good way.
All right. So apart from imposter syndrome being the only challenges that someone can face in being a lifelong learner, what are the other challenges that you think young people particularly can face in the ambition to learn, and how can they overcome it?
So I think in terms of um, challenges that most young people will face, I think first I always see is time management. Lifelong learning is on the spectrum of you have a job, you have a day job, right? Let's say again, I'm a lawyer, so a lot of my examples are lawyers. You have a day job and you practice a certain profession. This is not where you want to be. You want to be here, right? Um, you have to do a lot of personal learning. A lot of it will require you doing personal reading outside of work hours. So I think a key challenge is time management and being able to organize yourself in a way where you can make out time, organize your affairs, make out time to learn. Take courses, write exams that would, essentially take you to that level for maybe your next role, maybe you're trying to transition into a new career. That's for time management. A lot of people also have financial constraints, if I'm being honest. You went to school, you read a particular course, now you want to transition. To transition will require you spending a lot of money, in terms of maybe taking courses, maybe writing exams. Sometimes you even have to leave your current job and maybe float for a bit before you can transition. So those are some of the issues that you would typically see for lifelong learning.
You mentioned that some people trying to transition, especially from we're in Nigeria, for example, most of those that study some certain courses in university, you're lucky you study law in uni and you're a practicing lawyer. However, for some people who are looking to transition to, let's say, from other courses to, let's say, tech, for example, what are the specific skills and resources? I know you mentioned time management, but what are other skills that you think that is very essential for making those tough decisions and learning decisions?
Okay, so I think first is um, I speak to ambition a lot. When I advise people, I tell them that it has to come from within, right? You have to first motivate yourself. So when you cross that first line of self motivation and ambition, then you have to have a plan. We have to set what I call very clear goals. This is where I am, and this is where I want to be, right? When you do that, then the next step is you need to have a plan. A plan is, I think Victor mentioned something about breaking it down, right? You need to break, and this is a more different context, but you have a plan, you need to break it down into the nitty gritty, right? Into smaller milestones. I like to also put timelines to things. So achievable milestones, you can have a tracker, can be Excel, you can have a software, put it and then have milestones to it. Being organized, you need to have um, you need to use tools like note-taking apps. You need to put things in your calendar. Again, it ties to my second point on being able to push yourself as well. And then, lastly, you need to assess your progress. And I like to advise people to be very objective when it comes to um, reflecting and assessing your progress. You can also have a mentor um, that you trust that will tell you the truth on how much progress you're making.
Yeah, thank you for that point. But sometimes you might have done all of these things, even working in your dream job, and then you face a certain drawback and challenges. How do you deal with, or what are you going to advise someone that is dealing with drawbacks or has to start all over again after changing and making life decisions and none of these decisions are working?
What I advise is always patience, right? And that's not um, what most people in that situation like to hear. But I'm always convinced that if you are doing things right, if you have a clear plan, and if you follow your plan, things will work out eventually. It's just a matter of patience. And I think where most people get it wrong is in the plan and the execution. Some people get it more faster. There's a bit of luck in it for most people as well. Some people are more qualified than others, right? So some people will get it faster than others. But if you keep at it and if you keep focused and you have patience, you will get there. And I have so many examples. I know people that started out, they didn't believe that they would get there. It's just a matter of time. And if you keep at it and be consistent, it's just a matter of time.
What would you say to self-esteem in this issue as well with your lifelong learning? There are a lot of people who need so much work to do with their self-esteem as well. How do you advise them to go in that direction, or what are the things they need to do to believe more in themselves?
I think self esteem ties to self assuredness. And self assuredness is linked to how much content you have as a person, right? And what do you have to offer most of the time? Um, there are self esteem issues when sometimes you don't really know your stuff. Um, but what I tell people is that if you double down and do the work, and if you know your stuff, again, I'm speaking more professionally now, um, you practice a certain profession and you double down and you understand what you're doing, you learn the work. Again, I think it's a matter of time. Some people, maybe from school, maybe from family, they've had things that happened to them that affected their self-esteem. But I think that ultimately, the older you, the older you grow, and the more advanced you become in your career, it solves itself naturally sometimes.
All right. So if you have questions, just write them down. Shortly, we'll get those questions so that we can. But I want to ask you about your stance on work-life balance and how for a lot of people that is working, and there's a lot of debate around work-life balance lately. I want to hear your points on that.
Before I came on this stage, I did a tweet where I said, should I give my lawyer political answer to work-life balance, or should I say what is really on my mind? I think it depends. I think it depends on a lot of things. If you ask me, it depends on first the industry you work in, right? I think we need to put a lot of context into work-life balance. Um, the industry you work in has sometimes their demands. So let me give you an example. I know people that work in investment banking. Uh, you work in Goldman Sachs in London. Before you got into Goldman, you know the demands. You know how the industry works. You know how the company works. If you work in the service industry, for example, where um, companies thrive on timelines, sometimes you have a briefing. Somebody calls you by 5 p.m. and they want the work out the next day by 8 a.m. in the morning. That's not ideal, but that's what the company sells sometimes, right? So in those sort of circumstances, it's a bit difficult, to say. Again, I'm speaking more to um, work hours now and how much time you put into the work, which of course affects how much time you have for yourself. But speaking more generally, I think that it will be very difficult for you to give your best if you don't have work-life balance. And some people thrive in saying things like, you are young and you're not supposed to have work-life balance. You're supposed to, be in the office every time. I mean, for people that work in the office, so you're supposed to work all the time when you're younger. I used to say things like that, up until very recently, and I think I have a more balanced view now that.
What influenced that decision or that word feel now?
So where I used to work before in my former job, um, again, there was just a notion of you need to put in the hours, you need to put in the work. Sundays you're in the office, Saturday you're in the office, you're working. Somebody sends you an email by 10 p.m., you respond, you start working. More work is not everything. I think eventually you look back a couple of years later, you realize that there are personal aspects of your life that have suffered. You may have progressed professionally, but there are other parts of your life that matter. And I think it also ties to lifelong learning and your ability to grow in your career. There are a lot of things that you want to do, and this is not just probably partying or going to the club or having fun. There are things like you want to take a course, you want to learn something new. You're not going to have time to do that. So I know many people that are stuck in their careers today because they give the company all their time. They didn't have time to learn new skills, they didn't have time to learn other things, and now they can't leave, right? Because they are stuck. This is where their skill set fits. So my general advice these days is, um, and it's good to also communicate to people that you work with, right? And be clear on how you work or how you want to work. You will give your best, you will do your work, but there are going to be boundaries. And I think the older you get, the more advanced you become in your career, the more you can make these requests. You communicate, you set boundaries, but when you start making these requests, you actually have to do the work, right? So when it's work hours, you actually have to deliver. It will be difficult for you to make a case for work-life balance if you're not doing the work, to be honest. So when you do the work, when you're supposed to do the work, when you deliver your work according to schedule, then you can set those boundaries, right? And I think I mentioned something about time management as well, which is very crucial. Time management for work, time management for your personal life, right? And to learn how to say no to things that are not very important. Um, but generally, this is my
Won't people
view.
hate you for that?
Is that?
Won't people hate you for that?
This is my personal view now. It wasn't my view previously, but this is my personal view now. I think everybody needs to find a balance. I think ultimately, eventually, you realize that work is important, but there's just more to life than just working.
So, like to have questions from the audience. All right, please can we get the mic for the lady over there? All right. And if you have questions, if you are facing any challenges in on being a lifelong learner, Chidi is here to answer them. So you can, yeah, you can just raise your hand as well. Will you have one hand? All right.
Hi everyone. So before you started afresh in your new role, did you do the entire like saving for 3 months? They always advise, oh, before you leave your role that you should save up for 3 months. Did you do that? And also, did you start off in your um new role as an intern, or you like what role did you start with? Yes.
Okay, if I got your question correctly, before I transitioned, if I had savings for. Okay, so that wasn't necessary because I think I resumed the next week after my previous job, and it was a better paying job, to be honest. So I didn't really have to do that. But for most people, it's a requirement, especially when you don't have something planned when you're transitioning, and it's typically a case where you have to keep something on the ground to help you while you try to transition into a new role.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, but the second one, so that means you didn't start off with an entry role, like you just straight up went to the top.
You didn't start off on another entry level
No,
role.
no, no, not at all. I went on the same. It was the same level essentially from what I was in my previous role.
So and I think maybe that questions we need to also explore that option. So if, let's say, for example, you're in a senior level, in a particular role, maybe as a senior associate, for example, and you're looking to start all over your career, or even sometimes you're applying to leave your workplace, for example, whether it's very toxic and etc. And most of your options are available for you are like very junior roles. What would the advice be? Would you advise the person to go for that junior role, even though it's going to align them for future career prospects?
Oh, definitely. It's something I also advise people to do. Because what you see is that most times you will catch up, right? Most times you catch up, and it's a sacrifice, and most times that sacrifice will be worth it. It's a sacrifice that you may have to make in your career. Maybe you are a bit more senior here, and where you want to transition to, the only available role is a more junior role, or even based on your experience. Say you're moving to a new company or a new industry where you don't qualify for a senior role. You're objective to yourself, you know that you have to go and start on a junior role. If you put in the work, most of the time it will pay off. And you may compare yourself to your peers where you're coming from, and you will see that if you put in the work, it will level up and you get to that point as well.
Thank you. Just to be clear, do you have any other questions from the audience? All right. So, what do you think companies and organizations can do to support staff and people who want to be lifelong learner, they want to improve in their career? What do you think they can do better? What do you think they're already doing something great already with the organizations that we have here in Nigeria?
Okay, so I think for that as well, I like to put a lot of context on things. It depends on where you work, it depends on the stage your employer is at. Sometimes it also depends on the level of resources they have. But generally, again, going to time management, companies can support through flexible work arrangements. And sometimes some people can afford to do fully remote. Some companies will say you do hybrid. So if you have a remote or hybrid structure, then you have more time to do other things that will contribute to lifelong learning. Um, Secondly, financial incentives. Again, I mentioned that one of the setbacks will be finances. There are companies that would pay your tuition. I know in law firms, there are companies that you want to go and do your masters, they will pay your tuition. Some people will say, okay, maybe when you come back, you have to work for 4 years or 5 years after you come back. There are companies that pay for your courses. There are companies that even tell you at the start of every year, do a list of courses you want to attend, and we pay for it. It's some sort of bonus that they give employees. Mentorship opportunities, very important. Sometimes it can be in-house mentorship opportunities. Some other times it can be the company matching you with seniors outside that work in your exact space, that have more experience than you, that will take out time to mentor you. Also, learning resources and other programs. Some companies invest more in this than others, or companies that would invest in courses. In my industry, firms have libraries, actually well-built libraries with books where you can go in and read. Um, and these are the things that they can do to support you in your lifelong learning goals.
All right. We'll be rounding off shortly, but I want to ask one personal question, and which is, how do you stay motivated to learn new things? And then before that, I want you to also um, tell me about some of your future learning goals as well. First, how do you stay motivated?
Um, my answer to that question, a couple years ago, it used to be money. If I'm being honest, right?
I think that's for everybody.
But I think it goes beyond money. Um, Again, there's ambition and your your personal drive to be successful. I want to be very successful. I think I can be successful because I've seen people that have been successful, and I've asked them what they did, and they've given me their roadmap, and I think I can do it because what they did. So it depends again on industry. For my industry, it's a bit different. People have told me what they did for 15 years of their career to get to where they are. And it varies from time management to just being very curious to work ethic, right? To being proactive with your work, just things like that that essentially help you to get to the top of your career. So how do I motivate myself? For me, it's the personal drive to be successful, right? And again, if I add money as well, if I'm being honest.
Thank you guys for staying with us. I want you to give a round of applause for Chidi and myself.